It's not entirely live yet.
Oh.
It's in process. Okay, and I think you're there.
Is anybody there? Can you hear us?
It often takes a little bit to kick off.
I was sitting here as though I expected someone to actually answer with a voice. Some days are struggles.
That's right. It is Saturday.
It is. It is.
Oh, I don't know if this has registered that we're live yet. Hang on, since I'm waiting over here. What is going on? I thought that it says live.
Let's see a counter.
Yeah.
If anybody's there, give us some feedback. Okay, if you're listening, we're just trying to be sure that we're on.
Oh, I think there we are.
Okay. So, welcome back to the Victorian Barroom. I am here with a fellow that you have seen here before and you've heard a lot about on the show. This is Alan Bishop, the alchemist of the Black Forest of Indiana, and my partner on the recent Absinthe documentary that I am flattered to say many people actually watched all the way through.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
We can see the average watch time of everything.
I've gotten a lot of feedback about it and a lot of email about it from people. So I know it's been seen and people seem to really enjoy it. So I've not been here. I've been to your house.
That's true.
But see, I've never been behind
the bar.
actual bar.
Yeah.
Which I thought was like cardboard.
It's real wood.
That we could do some sort of stunt with, but it's clearly going to hurt. So we probably shouldn't.
Right. No, it is real wood. It is able to be broken down and moved from place to place. But, yeah.
Right. Preferably in one piece.
Yes.
So, it goes back the way it's supposed to.
Well, so first and foremost, we really want to thank everybody who has watched, who has liked, subscribed, shared it, especially to get the word out, because we put more than 3 years in on this whole thing. It started off as something we were doing at work and then just wound up something that we were doing because we wanted to see it done. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, honestly, it's I was telling, like I said to Kevin the other night on Bar Cart Co-op.
Yeah.
I forgot the name of it there. I apologize, but it's one of my favorite projects that I've ever been a part of.
Well, I'm flattered. For me too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to drink a little bit here. Obviously, we're not just going to talk about it. So this you've seen. Oh, do we have a?
First of all, Aiden is watching. He just can't comment, but he says. Oh. He can see us.
Great.
Are you my mummy? Says happy Saturday, and the doc was fantastic. So let's definitely hear more about the doc.
Thank you so much. Yes, and so we're not gonna mix any of the actual Locust Grove Noge absinthe today because there's only a little bit of it. We have, if you watched us on was it Bourbon Turntable we were on, or was it Bar Cart Co-op? On Bar Cart Co-op, we were on there the other night, and we were using Death in the Afternoon, which Alan formulated and is being sold down in Key West, right?
Yep. We get Death in the Afternoon, and the other one that's coming out here shortly is what did Jim call it? I can't remember, but it's basically an amethyst absinthe. So it's a purple absinthe that I prototyped for him using maize morado corn as the coloration.
Awesome.
Yep. Voodoo something or another.
Okay. So that's something we haven't seen on the scene in quite a while is amethyst absinthe, but very much was a thing in the 19th century, right?
Honestly, I think I just made it up.
Oh, okay. I thought that it existed. Yeah, well, there you go. It's going to be great. Right. So I'm going to do all three at once, and I'm going to do a little bit of whatever that is. Demystification. First of all, we have...
Welcome to Struggle Saturday.
Right. It's tired, guys. I'm tired. Okay, we've got just 3 regular goblets here from the 1870s. So before there was all of the purpose-made, mystical kind of ritual around absinthe, it was just part of the bar, basically. So if you look at the Impressionist paintings of people drinking absinthe in the 1870s, 80s, and 90s, you're just going to see goblets that are basically shaped like this that people are drinking it out of. They also, when the popularity kicked off, they didn't have really the fancy fountain so much. A lot of times you would have more like a bowl with a funnel at the bottom. You would hold over it if you were doing dripping. But then there was also all these other easier ways of mixing it. And if you hung with the channel up to this point, you might have seen this recipe. But we're going to do it here just because I think it's a really great one to show that you don't have to get crazy to jump into absinthe. Okay, you can just have your regular cocktail stuff and do just fine. And if I can find my There it is. Okay, so this is called Frozen Absinthe. It's from 1882, I believe. Where the proportions are usually like 2-to-1 water to absinthe. I'm probably going to do a little bit more than that.
It's a fancy drink at that time.
Yeah. And so this is the Death in the Afternoon.
We've got 2 more people saying how much they love the doc. Maven, 1998, loved the video. Uriah says, hope everyone's having a good Saturday. The doc on Absinthe was awesome.
Thank you so
Excellent.
much. Okay, I'm trying to think what I just did there. Doing all at once.
You got this. Don't get nervous now.
You know, the thing is, this one's pretty simple. You're only going to screw it up so bad.
Right. This is what's fun about doing other people's shows, is I don't have to worry about messing anything up. I just have to be here.
So as you can see, if you do 2-to-1 absinthe and water, I did a little bit more absinthe to water there than that, but you can just play around with it. We're using gum syrup. Again, Library and Company has a good gum syrup. If you don't want to make your own, we're just going to do a teaspoon per drink. And as Alan was saying the other night, he formulated the Death in the Afternoon, and you don't actually have to use sugar in this to make it delicious.
Yeah, it's got a huge proportion of anise and a fairly healthy dosage of licorice root as well. So
Gotcha.
that mouthfeel and that sort of illusion of sweetness already exists.
Right. So just like a martini, we're just going to shake it until it's nice and chilled. See if we can get it somewhat even.
I like that there's a full football stance happening here.
Gotta be active. All right, everybody. There we are.
Nice. It smells great too.
Thank you so much.
Super
There you are,
aromatic.
sweetie. And this is the Death in the Afternoon. Here's to y'all.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
Wow. Nose on that.
Mhm.
Wonderful. It won't fix it, but it'll make you forget about it.
There you go.
For sure. Or remember it in a way that you wish you hadn't.
The absinthe or the drink itself?
Both.
Yeah. So that's all there is to it, really. I mean, you can do it just that easy the way you would do any other cocktail. A little bit of syrup, water, absinthe, about half the absinthe to water. I kicked it up a little bit, and you're good to go. So you don't have to invest in hundreds of dollars worth of equipment in order to experience absinthe.
Excellent, man.
Thank you so much.
Really, really nice.
So that's Real Taste of the Past. So any questions right now, sweetie?
A lot of people just said how much they like the documentary. For people who are just coming in, if you want to repeat what the Fascination Street is, or no, this was the Death in the Afternoon.
This was the Death in the Afternoon, and this Kevin Rose split his bottle with me. That's why it doesn't have the label on it, which is very nice of him. But yeah, Alan formulated this absinthe for Key West Trading Company.
U.S. Trading Company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can actually order it and have it shipped to your door in most states, which I didn't know until we did the show the other night. But this is a true expression of a 19th century absinthe.
You can also get in on his, I can't remember, through Kickstarter or whatever it is, but on his funding his absinthe company as they expand the Absinthe House into New Orleans as well. So with the Voodoo Fairy absinthe, I think is what that one was called that we were trying to think of, the amethyst colored absinthe. So
Right.
Absinthe seems to be a growing market. People are getting interested in it finally. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever going to be a huge thing, but it doesn't have to be.
Right.
It just has to be something that people know about and they understand the history of and the reason for and the connections to everything else that's connected to outside of just beverage alcohol.
Yeah. Honestly, I think I like a thing better when it hasn't become a thing.
I agree with you.
You know,
I agree with you.
Yeah. But it's just something we can enjoy
when
because
there's no bubble to worry about.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
we just enjoy it because we enjoy it. So for those coming in, again, we want to thank everybody who watched the documentary, who liked, subscribed, and especially shared it. That was 3 years worth of a labor of love to get that together, and the product was outstanding.
Weird haircuts.
Yeah, because of the 3 years, you might have seen Alan's
Fluctuating.
beard and my hair.
Fluctuating weight, like up and down. It's an emotional journey for me to watch.
Right. So that turned out well, and it's led to a broader discussion just about absinthe in general. And we did a poll recently. Amy put a poll out asking how people felt about absinthe and if they'd even tried it. And the majority of people who responded have not, even though they were interested in what we were doing, they hadn't actually tried absinthe themselves. And I think for some people, it was because they didn't know where to start, where to jump in. So since we got Alan here and he makes it, do you have any thoughts on that? If you just want to get started, where to jump in?
As far as absinthe to buy in the commercial market in general, so I would recommend the Jade Liquors stuff. Ted Bro, who was kind of he headed up the effort to get absinthe re-legalized in the United States. He was part of an interesting group of guys that were home distillers back in the early 2000s. That didn't get nearly enough credit for what they did, but they were all very much so sort of the dorkiest of the dorks when it came to home distilling. And so they got interested in how absinthe was made. And also absinthe producers were always very, very secretive of what they were using, how they were doing things. And although there were some things published in books, those things might get you into sort of the ballpark of what absinthe was, but they weren't true, complete absinthe recipes. So Ted and this little group, they broke down what absinthe was. Ted started doing gas chromatography on vintage absinthe samples. And if you want to know what the Belle Epoque style absinthe stuff tastes like, the Jade Liqueurs line is really where you're going to find it at. He has gone back and basically tried to reproduce old Belle Epoque absinthe varieties. And then next to that, the Death in the Afternoon, if you can get it from QS Trading. And they do some shipping, but I can't remember who his shipping company is off the top of my head. But you can certainly look around for the Death in the Afternoon absinthe and get a hold of that. It is a true Belle Epoque style absinthe. We based it very much so on what was very popular in that time period. It's not as maybe sweet as some of the Jade types are, because we definitely push the fennel a little bit harder to get some of that savory to come through. Because while I love what I would call a nice dessert absinthe, I think if you're going to sit down and have more than a glass, you kind of want to stay away from it being overly sweet. And some of those can go a little overly sweet sometimes. But I think those are good ones to get a hold of. And then, of course, Spirits of French Lick. We've got this is like the training wheels for absinthe.
Very approachable, very delicious.
Yeah, so much more of a Swiss Le Bleu or uncolored style. Not nearly as anise heavy, I guess I would say. Still definitely identifiably an absinthe, but a little easier to approach initially. If you like root beer, you're going to like absinthe. So you may not even realize it. But and if you think not, then get you some good root beer and pour a little absinthe in there. There you go. Make a go of it. So
that made me think when you're talking about the sweetness of the absinthe, something we've talked about on the show a lot. When we're talking about the Victorian style mixology versus the classic style of mixology. Mm-hmm. The classic style tends to be kind of light and crisp. Mm-hmm. The Victorian style tends to be heavy and sweet, which also is how they like to eat.
Right.
So that makes a lot of
decadent,
so that makes a lot of sense, that it was like that.
Well, it's interesting with absinthe historically too, because we talked about this in the documentary. And several times as well, but where absinthe came from originally, and that it was very much tied to tradition of medicinal alcohols, or what I, as Alan Bishop of the Alchemist Cabinet, not Alan Bishop of Spirits of French Lick, might call functional alcohols, but TTB doesn't like that phrase. So that is alcohols that might have medicinal effects that are potentially worthwhile for certain people, for certain things. But the further back in absinthe history you go, the less sweet it gets.
Gotcha.
And then by the time you get back to its originating character of being a tincture alcohol from a mountainous region with a lot of herbs and botanicals, it would not have resembled anything like what we're drinking now. I've got some absinthe tincture at home that was sent to me by one of the Henriade descendants. We have one of the Henriade descendants that lives in the state of Indiana, as a matter of fact. She's written a couple of books, Kate Henriade Jaw.
Okay.
So she wrote a book called Alewives, or Absinthe, Alchemy, and Alewives. And then there was a follow-up book to that as well. But she actually uses the old Henriade recipe. And so I've had one of the original tinctures, and it is nothing like, it's not something you're going to sit down and have a couple glasses of. Gotcha. You're going to have a glass of it, and you may not even like it. And then you're going to go on about your day because it's going to help settle your stomach or whatever you need to do, or maybe provide some, relief if you need to sleep.
Gotcha.
So
that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Well, and stop me if I shouldn't talk about this, but haven't we also talked before about wormwood's antiviral?
Yeah,
properties.
yes, very much so. Antiviral, antibacterial. There was a French study back during the pandemic that came out that talked about various different varieties of wormwood, including mugwort, annual wormwood, grand wormwood, petite wormwood, and all of them had anti-COVID properties.
Huh.
So it's kind of interesting because if you recall, and we won't name any names, but we had some friends that were running around, quite a bit during COVID, and as long as I was providing them with absinthe, they seemed to be immune. And the minute they ran out, they all got COVID.
I was part of one of those groups. So there you have it. It's a really interesting drink that hopefully we're just going to continue to rediscover as we get into the 21st century and the myths kind of fall away. I'm going to check in with Amy. Do we have any questions or feedback?
More folks saying they loved the documentary.
Thank you.
I would say if you just want to get a little more specific about how can folks living in different parts of the country maybe try to find what you're making, what you're recommending.
That is a good question because we don't have wide distribution. So we do have shipping that is available through spiritsofFrenchlick.com, if I remember, through a third-party vendor. And I think the absinthe is on there. If it is not, you can always reach out to Sillbox.com, and they can get you the Absinthe Blue. Right now, we are out of the Fascination Street, but we do have some more barrels of that set back. So that is a barrel-aged absinthe that's also been amethyst filtered, just for fun as much as anything else. But absinthe does have some esoteric occult roots too, so we wanted to play into that. Short of that and coming to the distillery, it's kind of hard to get a hold of our stuff. We do have distribution in multiple states, Texas and St. Louis and Kentucky and a little bit of New York, New Jersey, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee. And I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. Your best bet is to check spiritsofFrenchlick.com. You'll be able to find my stuff that way. And then the same with the Death in the Afternoon. Reaching out, getting on their website, checking out. I know, like I said, Jim has distribution. I want to say it's like 48 states they can ship to.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So you should be able to find that one fairly easily.
So sorry for you if you're in the 2 states, you can't get it.
We'll try to get then a lot of those links in the description when this video goes up.
This is one, St. George. This is
great absinthe. Yeah,
this is probably the best, easiest to get a hold of one that's out there. It is between $60 and $70 usually. Mm-hmm. Don't just save up for it or something. It's
that's a great example of an Americanized absinthe too. So one of the things we talked about is, there's a lot of absinthe out there. There's a lot of very bad absinthe out there too that doesn't really qualify as a true absinthe. Even the ones that sometimes qualify as maybe a true absinthe, maybe they didn't know what they're doing. They don't know their botanical amounts, all that stuff, all the secrets of the guilds back in the day. But St. George has not only made a great traditional absinthe, what they've done is they've Americanized it to some degree. So this has actually got a little bit of stinging nettle in it, if I remember correctly.
Really? Okay.
So they changed up their botanicals quite a bit here. And as far as mouthfeel goes and as far as flavor goes, that's in my top 5 commercial absinthes that are out there. Even one of them in terms of some of the vintage absinthe that I've had, that's right there where it should be. So
it's solid. In general, I've found, at least we're in Kentucky, Alan comes from Indiana, and we still get along. But
barely. It's because the war hasn't started.
Right. Other than the Absinthe Blue, which you can usually get for less than $50, I have found that it is not worth your time to get an absinthe that's less than 60.
I would agree with that completely. Anybody who's making an absinthe for less than 60, I can't see any financial way that you're doing this. So one of the things that we might want to talk on there with the authenticity of an absinthe too is that I always joke around, and I told you from the get-go, making a true absinthe is a distiller's thesis because it has all the connections to alchemy, and spagyric medicine in particular, as well as tincturing. And when I say tincturing, what I mean by this, the difference between making an absinthe and making like a gin or an aquavit or another botanical spirit is the sheer amount of botanicals that have to go into it.
Right.
Gin and aquavit don't come from that same tradition at all. While they were sort of functional alcohols for their time, they were medicinal for the time. Absinthe by far has more botanicals in it than any of those will. And they're not necessarily always easy to get or acquire botanicals, especially if you want quality botanicals. But you would literally, if you were going to distill, let's just say that was your base alcohol that you were going to distill on a little tiny still. you would actually have that same amount of botanicals as what you have liquid.
Gotcha.
It's a solid state distillation. It's literally 1-to-1.
And we have a great shot of that in the documentary. If you watched all the way through, we show you the jug of the spirit with the botanicals in it. Yeah, with the 1-to-1.
One of the most expensive spirits I ever made was a black absinthe that I did on an 8-gallon still. And that was every bit of almost $700 worth of botanicals.
Wow.
For that one. It's something you can never do commercially.
Right.
In any way, shape, or form. Not to that level.
Yeah.
So, there's no such thing as cheap absinthe.
Well, and when we talk about that too, we say $60 for a bottle of absinthe, and that seems, or more. And that seems like a lot. Keep in mind, you're not going to be drinking this like you're drinking whiskey. Okay. Even if you're somebody who likes to do cocktails and drink, I mean, we do this all the time. And I think we might get 1 or 2 bottles of St. George a year, and that's it. So save your pennies. If you have to, just go for the good stuff. And I will say too, that just because you pay it doesn't mean it's going to be good. Don't be discouraged. Okay. There was one that I brought to when we were doing. Yeah, it was. It had a. I'm not gonna say who it was because I don't want to be mean, but it had a nasty bitter taste on the back. I just thought it was worth a try, and it was. But we didn't stick with that one. It's still sitting over there mostly.
I think it was called carrot dirt or something.
Yeah,
I don't know. It was not good.
Right. So it's not everything's created equal. Don't be discouraged. Just have fun with it.
Well, as you're saying, so you're not going to drink it like a whiskey. So one of the things that people should know is most absinthe is going to be bottled above 120 proof.
Exactly.
Usually upwards of 130, 140. And the reason for that is because it's like an extract. That's what tinctures were. They're extracts, right? So it's a very concentrated thing that you're going to add water to. You're not going to be drinking it at 135, 140. I mean, I guess you could if you want to have a real good time, but you're going to be drinking this at closer to like 14% alcohol by the time, if you lose it, just drink it traditionally. It's going to be like a strong glass of wine. So 2 or 3 of those, and you're going to be just fine.
Well, that's something we try to drive home to people too, is that's how it's meant to be consumed. We've done events where people were like, well, I want the full experience, and they think it's like drinking a bourbon. It's not. That's not the way it's intended to be done. It's not drinking liquor like we usually think of drinking liquor. I'll even say that if I'm sitting down in the evening and I want to have a couple of drinks and I start off with an absinthe, I'll have the absinthe. If I want to keep going, I'll switch to bourbon or rye, something like that.
So that's funny because if I sit down and have absinthe, I'll have 2 or 3 glasses of absinthe and I won't have anything else.
Gotcha.
And after the third one, I probably feel pretty good, but I'm like, I'm just going to go to bed now.
There you go.
So one of the other interesting things maybe we should touch on too that we touch on in the documentary is, we sort of touched on some of the mystery here in this already. People probably picked up that there's, an occult, esoteric sort of leaning thing that happens as well. There's also all the various, paraphernalia, all the connections to the psychopalms, etc. But absinthe will not make you hallucinate. It just absolutely will not do that. If you're hallucinating from drinking absinthe, it's because somebody's put something in that, or because you have alcohol poisoning. One of the two. So it will cause a lucidity, though. So you'll be drunk, but you'll be aware that you're drunk, which is why the artists loved it, because they could still, to some degree, control their fine motor skills.
Right. It
also does seem to have this effect of some of the botanicals having a psychotropic effect of making colors seem more vivid, sound seem more vivid. You're just very aware of the world in which you're in. Yeah. So,
well, it was not our best viewed video, but there is actually a video here on the Victorian Bar. If you go back, I think a couple of years now and look for it. But I love, obviously, Victorian images, Victorian art, things like that. And the way I do research sometimes is when I find something that I have confidence in the date, I save it with the date first. So it's all in a timeline, and then also the source. So if I'm doing research on something like visually, I can go through and do that. One night, I sat down with a glass of absinthe and I just went through every image and snagged any of them from the late 19th, early 20th century of anything that made me think of absinthe. And then I put that to an 1890s orchestral piece that also kind of made me feel that way, and made that into a video.
Playlist. Yes.
And so it's called Absinthe Impressions. I like to just go back and watch it because I like the way it makes me feel sometimes. But
that's funny. So we always, whenever I come up with a new product, and I come up with a name and all that stuff, before I ever make it, I make a playlist. I've done it for all my whiskeys. I used to have them on YouTube. But so Fascination Street is a Curacao. So,
okay.
And very specifically, So if you're going to make a aged absinthe that you're going to drink almost like a dessert whiskey, right? So that's an end of the night sort of thing. And there's a line in that song where he talks about waiting for someone to kick the last nail in.
Gotcha.
Right. So it seems to be a very absinthe oriented sort of song.
I think what I took was Eric Satie was a kind of a minimalist piano composer in the 1880s, 1890s, and a real weirdo apparently. But his friend Debussy took one of his best work, or a couple of his best works, and like turned them into orchestral pieces in the 1890s. And that's what I heard that just made me feel like it felt like absinthe.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, it was just very fitting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, absinthe certainly has a spirit and a feeling to it, without a doubt. More so, I'd say, than most other spirits do.
I would say so, yeah. So,
Maven 1998 is asking about absinthe available in Florida. I would assume the St. George and the Death in the Afternoon.
So Death in the Afternoon, definitely Key West, but I know Jim just picked up some distribution in Miami and South Florida, I do believe. So you should be able to find it at least in South Florida, if not now, then in the near future. The St. George, I don't know. I don't know what their distribution. I would suspect that
it's pretty common. I just don't know. And that's the thing when you're the fun, alcohol law is all about money. It's not about safety. It's one thing you just got to understand. Yeah. So the distribution law, you have this tiered system where you've got producer, distributor, and retailer, and so distribution is different in every state, and it's all political.
Yes,
basically.
Very much so.
Yeah,
and Florida being a control state too, control states are a little harder to get distribution in. I'm trying to think if I know of anybody else in Florida that makes an absinthe, but I can't think of anyone off the top of my head. We'll tell you there are some good agave spirits happening in Florida.
Oh, really?
Some really wonderful ones. Red Horse Distillery makes a great agave spirit. Just a white agave spirit, and it's really nice. So,
but if you're there in Florida and you can get you some Death in the Afternoon, you can get you some St. George, you'll be good to go.
I want to know more about this amethyst filtering. That's my birthstone.
Mine too. So there's some symbology behind it. So the first and foremost, I would just say this is the God's honest truth. So Dan Aykroyd is my favorite actor of all time, and I love Ghostbusters. And so anyone else who ever decided that they wanted to filter anything through any crystal ever, and bear in mind that I'm also the host of If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything. So I'm all about the paranormal, the 4TN, high strangeness, all of that stuff. If anyone else other than Dan Aykroyd ever said they were going to filter something through crystals, I would make fun of them. But that includes myself. But since Dan Aykroyd says it's okay, then, a little trippy. But more so than that, so the amethyst thing in particular. So thinking of absinthe as being both an herbal medicine and a beverage alcohol, and being connected to the mysteries and the hedge witches, various different secret societies, etc. throughout the times. One of the things with amethyst is that it's considered a sacred stone, and one of its sacred properties is that it's actually connected to the god of wine and fertility, Dionysus or Bacchus. And as such, there's a Greek legend about one of his lovers being turned into amethyst and being a reminder to stay sober and to appreciate the things in life that actually mean something, as opposed to the escapism that you might find within normal alcohols, right? So think of absinthe as being a philosophical alcohol, and so spending a little bit more time with it, appreciating it, but appreciating it in smaller quantities, and keeping your temperance and your sobriety, and so thus filtering over top of amethyst seemed to make a lot of sense as far as I was concerned. So
that is interesting.
But I won't tell you that it does anything, because I can't prove that it does, but it looked really cool on video when we did it. So,
Well, how many things do we know does something that we can't?
Right. I presume that it does some things, but I'm not going to tell you what they are. You can figure that out on your
own. We've had a few people come in just looking at the number of viewers who weren't here before. So if you want to maybe repeat who y'all are and what you're doing.
Yes, so welcome back to the Victorian Bar Room, and we are here with the alchemist of the Black Forest of Indiana, Alan Bishop, and you have heard his name a lot on the show because we've used his work a lot on the show at Spirits of French Lick. So we're very glad to have him here. Alan was my partner on the Absinthe documentary that just came out, and we really wanted to thank everybody for watching, liking, subscribing, and especially sharing. the documentary. It was a long labor of love, and we have been very flattered because we can see how long you viewed. But we've been very flattered at how many people have actually stuck in and watched the whole film. So
that is by ISP number, by the way, just so you're aware. We know. I like how you get all fired back up when she's like, reintroduce yourself, and you're like, I don't have that, Brian. I'm just.
We have a good buddy. Amy, of course, is behind the camera, and she is the producer. So.
Here's a thought. Because again, we keep talking about this idea of how people getting into absinthe. There's some bad absinthe out there.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of bad absinthe out there.
What if someone has had a bad absinthe experience?
Well, truthfully, I would say that there's a lot of that because when absinthe got re-legalized, well, even before it got re-legalized in the U.S., over in some of the old Soviet bloc countries in particular, there were some very bad producers who were basically taking grain-neutral spirit vodka, adding some essential oils and some bright green coloration. First of all, if you ever see an absinthe that is like emerald green, it's fake. Guaranteed, it's absolutely fake. There's no way it's real. It doesn't. Even when it's brand new and colored with botanicals, it never goes that color. It might go peridot or something like that. And then as it ages, as you can see with the St. George, sort of gets a little oxidative property to it, like dead leaves in the fall sort of thing. So if you had a bad absinthe, I apologize for your experience. There were also some very bad absinthes produced whenever it was first legalized over here. Mansynth was kind of an example of it. And honestly, it wasn't that bad of an absinthe. It's just that their production was very inconsistent. There were a couple of other sort of imitation absinthes like Absinthe, etc., that just were not very good at all. And they're not good representations at all of what a true absinthe should be. The other thing I should point out is there are a lot of absinthes out there. And I don't mean this in any negative way whatsoever, but I'll give an example. I worked at Copper and Kings and I worked on the absinthes there. They're not bad absinthes, but they have much more in common with an Ozu than they do a true absinthe.
And can you define Ozu for the audience?
So typically a great base spirit that is flavored with at least star anise at the very least, but also potentially some licorice root. The Copper and King stuff did have grand wormwood in it, and it is a nice approach to absinthe, I think, for beginners, but it certainly goes more in that anisette sort of direction, that Ozu sort of direction than a true traditional absinthe. But don't take that as bad absinthe because it's not. It's just a very different style of absinthe. Certainly, I think one of the problems that absinthe had is that it had this great launching pad in 2007 when it became legal again. But what it didn't have is producers that were ready to actually make absinthe.
Gotcha.
What it had were some producers that had big money that thought they could make something real close to absinthe, at least in terms of, packaging and the way that it was talked about and the sort of hallucinatory properties and all of the sort of bad boy image of absinthe, but none of the quality of absinthe. And so what happened is it came out, people tried it, they immediately got turned off to it.
Right.
And so the market dropped off. Excuse me. Let me not die. And then it took a couple years before it started to come around again. And thankfully, it's starting to come back around again now, I think. The other thing that happens is people don't like black licorice in the United States. And so they immediately associate the anise flavor with black licorice. And while they are somewhat similar, they're not exactly the same. And even if you think you don't like absinthe, you probably like root beer. And if you like root beer, you probably will find something in absinthe that you also like. So.
Well, and one thing that we found, the different events we've done around the absinthe we did, the people who like there's a lot of people who like black licorice. They're surprised that they do like it, that we found. So that's one thing to keep in mind. That's just real world stuff we've seen. And two other things. First of all, I have a trace bit of absinthe left that you made at Copper and Kings.
Nice.
That I always hope we could have together.
Okay.
And
clearly I'm dying. So
right, so you may as well have it.
I'm living my nightmare of dying on live video right now. Like every time I do a podcast, I'm like, it's gonna happen. It's gonna be now.
Hopefully not right now.
Right.
At the Victorian Bar.
Thank you.
Yeah. But I have a thing of water over here. So
that's all good.
I don't know if he's watching right now. My buddy Josh Wilson, who is often on these with us. There was a funny time we camped. If I'm camping, it's probably with Josh. But he brought this bottle one time with him. He's like, I found this bottle of absinthe. It was $30, and it says it's an original 1913 recipe. And it was the emerald glowing green. So let's give it a whirl.
Like kryptonite.
Yeah, and we both kind of gagged, and it was like, well, I don't doubt that they used an original 1913 recipe, but in 1913 they were doing bad stuff just like anybody else. So we had a little period experience there together, me and Josh.
There were certainly some bad absinthes back during the heyday of absinthe too. We talked about this a little bit the other night on the Bar Cart Co-op, but absinthe, once phylloxera had knocked out the grapes in France, and absinthe came into vogue as sort of a replacement for red wine for happy hour in France. The wine industry, they had to eventually replace absinthe again with wine. So they had to put absinthe, sort of off the board, and they did everything they could to vilify it. But more importantly, there was a period of time in the Belle Epoque where absinthe had become so popular that they came up with different grades. And I don't even know if I've ever talked to you about this, but
yeah.
So, you have your absinthe ordinaire, your absinthe superior. Those aren't really grades now today the way they were back then. But what they would do is you would have like your first pass of absinthe, which might be ordinaire is what they might call it, which was also the name of a doctor that helped popularize absinthe as well. But the ordinaire would be a good run of absinthe, but instead of taking the early tails, the section they would call blanquette, which is where in the lower end of the alcohol, it can't hold the oils. And putting it back in the next run, it would just be without that, right? So that'd be like an ordinary. A superior would be the same thing, but with the tails added back in, maybe a little age on it.
Okay.
But then you'd have this other lower grade, which would be, so we take these botanicals again, let's redistill them and pull the alcohol that's in the botanicals back out of the botanicals, and maybe it lucius, maybe it doesn't. People on the street don't really care.
Gotcha.
And then you'd have really cheap producers that would come in, and they would do kind of what was happening in those old Soviet bloc countries in the early 2000s, except instead of, green food coloring, we've got some copper salts over here from the still equipment. Let's just scrape those off the still and throw them in and color our absinthe with some copper salts.
So if you feel a little funny after drinking it, it's because you're poisoned.
Yeah. I would be very careful about vintage absinthes, but the cool thing about vintage absinthe is it's a very rare market. It's a very dedicated market of people that are really into it. And if you look around out there, if you really want to try vintage absinthe, there may or may not be a group or two out there that you can buy samples of vintage absinthe from in very small bottles.
So this is something the Victorian barroom was not even aware of. It's still out there.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Not a lot, and it's very expensive.
Gotcha.
A little 50 ml bottle might run you $115, $120 for something from before the ban, pre-ban. So,
well, if we get the chance to do that, and we'll make that happen.
Yeah,
that'll be a good show.
Exists.
Yeah,
it definitely exists. Not a lot, but it does exist. So
that's amazing. Well, we've gone a little over an hour, I think.
No, we haven't.
We haven't?
No, we're at 40 minutes.
Oh, right. We started at 3. Sorry, yeah. It always does go quick. I forgot we didn't start at 3.
And we haven't done absinthe myth busting yet.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Absinthe. Okay. Well, my favorite thing about absinthe is when it makes me go insane and I kill a lot of people.
Okay. All right. Was there anything else that you were imbibing at the same time?
Whiskey.
Okay.
Gin.
All right.
Wine.
Okay.
Beer.
Okay.
Jaeger.
Yeah.
Cocaine.
Wow.
Yeah. But the absinthe made me kill people.
I'm not saying that you might already have had some pre-existing conditions that might have predisposed you to murder, but insanity is insanity, and I don't think it has anything to do with it. How much absinthe did you drink?
A glass.
Yeah, I think you're just a bad person. That's really what it comes down to.
This is stuff that actually happened back then that the wine industry used to used to prove that absinthe was something that made you go insane and kill people.
Yes, it's definitely a very big part of the absinthe myth. Now, one thing I want to throw in on the absinthe myth busting thing as well, though. So something that is not a myth about absinthe in general is that's pretty close.
Nice.
Yeah, actually, I'll do that instead of the water. Something that is not a myth about absinthe, though, is that absinthe was created by women. So a lot of people may not realize that. But just as in Appalachia, we have what you might call granny witches. absinthe descended from a coven, a group of witches in the Valley de Traverse, named the Henriots. So Henriot is not a family name, that is a coven name. And the main name associated with it is Mère Henriade, and Mère is actually a title, is what it is. So Mother Henriade. It was stolen from women at a time when the Val de Traverse was coming under the influence of the church. And so it was becoming illegal for women to have patents on anything. So grimoires or grammaries, as you might know them, grimoire is a more common word nowadays, were not really so much spell books as they were herbal recipe books. And so the Henriots had been using their grimoires for years to figure out what the various mountain herbs did and how they affected people, how they affected their personalities, their sleep, their stomach, etc. And developed the absinthe out of that, and basically ended up in a situation where the husband figured out that he could make a lot of money selling that patent to a pharmacist, and it would ultimately end up in the hands of the church. So, just a little bit of modernization, killing little hedonism here and there, and life goes on, right?
Right.
So,
well, and that's, one thing that we talk about that, is key, I think, to the Victorian barroom is that we're looking at a time when life is changing very fast. Not as fast as what we're looking at now. And when you look at it in that context, you realize how jarring what's going on now is. But you've got this massive industrialization and commodification of goods happening that is disrupting the way that people had looked at the world and lived their lives for time immemorial.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Well, and kind of going back to the you murdering people thing, because I think we should talk about that for sure.
Right. Because of the absinthe.
Mm-hmm. Yes. That was one of the rumors that the wine industry came up with. So the wine industry had to come back into France and displace absinthe to get their market share back. And so the way that they did this was by vilifying absinthe in any way that they could, including claiming that one of the primary ingredients in absinthe was alpha thujone, which is in grand wormwood. They claimed at that time that it was a hallucinogen and it would cause madness, etc. And no doubt that some of those really cheap absinthes we talked about probably did cause some craziness. I mean, copper is a heavy metal. Yeah. So chances are if you're using copper, you're also using, at that time, they weren't really concerned about lead implements, lead solder, etc. Drinking anything at the time could have been potentially hazardous for your health. So it does all add up to some degree. But alpha thujone was never hallucinogen. It's actually a toxin is what it is. It can cause seizures in very high dosages. You're never going to get to that point drinking absinthe. You will die of alcohol poisoning before you ever get anywhere close to that. In fact, if you were to go down to your local store right now and buy a small little vial of sage oil for cooking, it has more alpha thujone in it than a bottle of vintage absinthe does. And that's how Ted Breaux actually got everything re-legalized back in 2007, because he did the gas chromatography. And when he looked back at those, see, the absinthe is, the murders are about to begin. The light went out. The murders are about to begin. So when he looked at that gas chromatography, what he figured out was there was never enough thujone, even in those vintage absinthe samples, to ever cause any kind of issue, really.
Well, and it seemed, I think you told me this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the TTB watches the amount of alpha thujone in absinthe very closely in the United States, right?
They did.
But isn't it true that they don't watch that in chartreuse, which comes from France, which does have more alpha thujone in it than absinthe is allowed to?
Right. Some things definitely seem to have been grandfathered in. Sage would be one of them, right? So they're not really worried about sage going into a distilled spirit. They want to know, but that is on, and it's not even a TTB necessarily. That becomes an FDA thing, because to be in a distilled spirit, it has to also be on the FDA generally recognized as safe list. And so there are certainly plenty of things on that GRAS list currently that are far more potentially toxic than the alpha thujone that is in grand wormwood.
Right.
So
Amy grows a bunch of sage in the garden every year. We put it in stuffing, and the FDA has never come to visit us.
Right. But now if you sell that stuffing at your tavern, then, or if you put it in a package. With a bottle of absinthe for Thanksgiving.
But I've never heard a single account of somebody going insane from chartreuse.
Right?
So,
well, I mean, I don't really want to live in a monastery and make chartreuse, so maybe maybe there's a connection. I don't know. But yeah.
Bill Kerr chimed in and said he did have some bright green absinthe in New Orleans about 15 years ago, and it was dreadful.
I'm sure it absolutely was. I'm sure that it was. Yes, if it looks like if it looks like the absinthe that was in the 9 Inch Nails: A Perfect Drug music video, it is not. It's not real absinthe. Although if it makes you feel like that video, it might be worth the hit. I'm just maybe. I do like Edward Gorey, and I like that artwork, and it is very absinthe-esque. So I might let that one slide.
There you go. So yeah, and I think I'm trying to remember the color of what we did. It was not even. It didn't lose a lot, and it wasn't even a deep green at all.
Mm-hmm. It was a very peridot sort of.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like a peridot stone. That's what it looked like. It was a dull color, but it was very full flavor.
Mm-hmm.
Much more so than most of the stuff you're going to get commercially.
Right, and we could have pushed the Lucian a little harder, but the one thing that I didn't really put in that was if there was licorice root in there wasn't much at all, and the reason was because I figured if there was any one botanical they probably would have had a hard time getting a hold of. Mm-hmm. That would have been the one that they would have had a hard time. And you don't really see licorice root show up in absinthe distillation until the early Belle Epoch, and even then it's almost a rectification agent in some ways. I don't think you and I ever talked about this, but they didn't even necessarily use it in the distillation. They made they did use it in distillation, but they made a syrup out of it first.
Huh.
It was separate from the other botanicals. They would make like a licorice root syrup and then pour that into the base alcohol and redistill it. So although there's nothing to disqualify an absinthe with licorice root, all it's doing is adding a little perceived sweetness and a little bit of mouthfeel to it. So,
well, that was the neat thing about making the documentary is that there's a few places where we evoke Belle Epoch imagery to kind of bridge the gap for people. Mm-hmm. We're trying to draw them back in time with us. And so it's like the Belle Epoch is where everybody thinks of absinthe being, but we're going a generation at least before that. So we evoke that imagery sometimes to kind of ground people, but it's like, okay, but now we're taking it further back. And so that was a really fun thing about this is it's in a place that it almost shouldn't be.
Well, and that's what's fun for me on the production side too, because while you're doing that on the filmmaking side, then I'm actually taking it back another generation, the 2 generations before that, to the mid 1700s to look at what their production practices were, because that's what I highly suspect was happening in Switzerland County. So with the color, for example, so typically you're going to use petite wormwood to get the coloration along with lemon balm and hyssop, which we did a little bit of petite wormwood, but not much because petite wormwood is very, very hard to grow in Indiana. Summers are way too humid. Mm-hmm. It's generally too wet here. It rots very easily. So what they were using in the mid 1700s, the Henriots, for example, was baby spinach. And so most of the color of ours came from spinach.
From spinach, yeah.
Because they would have certainly had spinach in Switzerland County. So.
Mm-hmm. So and one of the neatest things I think happened, it was just fortuitous when we went to the site where we went to one of the farms where absinthe was produced, which the funny thing was we were there with a descendant, and we just gradually comprehended over the time we were there and we saw hunting stands and no trespassing signs that she didn't still own this property. So we were just...
She may or may not have bothered to tell us that.
Right.
So
really fun lady. When we pulled up and stepped out of the vehicles, a domestic wormwood was right there. Yeah. Which was really neat.
Actually, it was a wild wormwood. So,
a wild wormwood.
So that was an annual wormwood. But we also did find mugwort, which is a domestic form, but that does grow wild in the state of Indiana. And so that was one of the big differences we talked about in the documentary as well was I doubt that they were using grand wormwood because they say that wormwood was already wild in Indiana, but grand wormwood is not native to Indiana. Annual wormwood and mugwort, however, annual wormwood is mugwort. This is an interesting thing you'll like too. This is a connection we maybe should have made in the film I didn't think about. Mugwort would have been brought in by the Vikings, by the Norse, for stone beer brewing.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And then gone wild from there.
Gotcha. So, and stone beer is something we've done together.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. And also connected to botanical distillations, green witches, paganism, hedonism, whatever you want to call it. So, kind of a neat little thing.
Yeah. So this, we could have gone on and on and on. We could have done a documentary that's probably 2-3 hours long, but we tried to keep it to under an hour, which we did. I want to say here too, since we have the benefit of having Alan here with us, don't feel like you have to keep your questions to absinthe. If there's anything else, we go into these things with a plan, but we have an intelligent audience that asks some great questions. And so if there's anything else you want to know, we got a few minutes left. Please let us know, and we would be happy to touch on it. And yeah, thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
$1 question. You can PayPal me at. No, I'm just playing.
Actually, Alan, I was going to say, why don't you tell everybody a little bit more about where they can find you and what projects you're working on and anything else?
Yeah.
Take the stage, man.
Thank you. So you can find me at the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute here on YouTube, where I talk all about home distilling and legal distilling. I'll answer your questions about distillation, whether you're an actual distiller yourself, thinking about getting into distillation, or you're just interested in distillation. I'm very passionate about the art of distillation, the history of distillation, and all forms of alchemy in general, not just alcohol distillation, but also medicinal distillations, herbal distillations, all the various cultures that are connected to that as well. I do a lot of research on the distilling history of Southern Indiana, specifically a region called the Black Forest, which was Washington, Orange, Lawrence, Crawford, Harrison, and Perry counties in Southern Indiana, where between 1858 and 1914, there were over 150 legal apple brandy distilleries, and it was considered the capital of apple brandy distilling in the world for almost a period of 70 years, which is pretty cool. I also I am a co-host of Distillers Talk with Christy Atkinson, where we talk to other craft distillers, other home distillers. We ask them all kinds of questions and try to get some cool answers out of them to really expand our lexicon on distilling. And then my newest project, my newest baby, is see, I almost did it there. If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything, which is sort of the paranormal, the Fortean, the high strangeness, all the weird things in the world. That is my podcast. You can find wherever you get your podcast, and we dive into everything. It's could be spirituality, could be religion, could be Bigfoot, could be high strangeness, Fortean things, Kentucky goblins down in Hopkinsville sort of stuff. What's one of the recent ones was, talking about UV lights and how different things fluoresce at night, different living things do, and how they have different patterns, and how that might play into some of the cryptozoological sightings that people have and all that sort of stuff. So great episode for those that are interested in Louisville, Kentucky. And I don't know if you had a chance to check it out or not, Brian, but we did an episode late last year with the gentleman who is the, he's not, I don't know, we're really hesitate to call him the caretaker, but he's over top of the fundraising arm for Eastern Cemetery in Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, okay.
And if you're not familiar with Eastern, that is the most overburied cemetery in the United States.
Gotcha.
It is a crazy, crazy story, and that is a great episode to listen to. So.
Yeah, I feel bad. I've been meaning to listen. I'm not a very techie guy. I don't know if this definitely would have gone to where it has been. It had not been for Amy pushing that to happen. But yeah, I keep on not down. I think I downloaded the app, but I don't know what to do with apps. So it's like that's as far as I got.
It wasn't in your Victorian.
Right. It's like I still need to get on that app.
Right?
Yeah.
I feel like very much so, Brian. I think that's why we're friends. Like, you've seen Beetlejuice, right? Did you ever see Beetlejuice?
I never did.
Oh my God, I'm gonna punch you.
Yeah.
We
He
can't
hasn't seen
talk anymore.
Ghostbusters either.
I knew that. I told him last time I was going to punch him for that. So yeah, there's a handbook in Beetlejuice called the Handbook for the Recently Deceased, because the owners of the house have just recently passed away and they don't know the rules of the afterlife.
Yeah.
I feel like you have that, but it's the Handbook for the Recently Victorian.
Right, and I haven't read it. Yeah. Well, one thing I've got to bring up now, we've got Alan here. You mentioned it just briefly in your comments, but apple brandy in the Black Forest region, that I count as more responsible for anything to what launched me on this path.
Great.
Because I loved what you did.
Thank you.
At Spirits of French Lick, the Old Clifty Hoosier apple brandy, and it reignited in me. It made me remember what a passion I had for orchards.
Good.
And then when COVID was happening, we were all home. We had time to think. I was like, well, what is it that I want to do that I have put zero effort into? And that's raising apples. And that is what spurred me to go out and start working at Hidden Hollow. And so that's been going on since May of 2020, I think. And I got there a little less these days than I used to, but it was as much of a passion as I thought it would be.
That's great. So, yeah, because my two passions are absinthe and apple brandy, ironically. Yeah. So agave is becoming a big part of that, but we're not able to grow agave here in Southern Indiana. So you gotta rely on our buddies down south to get some agave from. But no, I'm glad to hear that, because what I would like, it's ironic. Kevin Rose asked me earlier today, it's a weird question to answer because I'm not really ready to answer it. He goes, if you had to say what you thought your legacy, you might want your legacy to be one day, what is it? And I said, well, really, more than anything that I do, just bringing that attention back to the Black Forest of Southern Indiana.
Right.
And Spirits of French Lick has been a great platform for that, to be able to do the things that we have done through Spirits of French Lick. And, one day I may take that sort of practice somewhere else and do something of my own accord with it as well. So,
well, Amy can back me up on this. It's like, I want to grow apples. I want to be part of that tradition. And it's like, once we get our orchard established, if I have one customer and it's you to send those apples to you to make brandy out of,
sir.
Then, that'll be a good thing.
We'll do it all proper, and drink some absinthe and grind them up in a grinder first,
That sounds
and
great.
pretend to murder.
Yeah. We'll do the ritual dances and whatnot.
What kind of apples do you use? Ear apples.
So first of all, if it's not clear on our camera here, as the old Clifty Hoosier apple brandy from Spirits of French Lick. We've got a few more folks in the chat. We've got a fan of Distillers Talk.
Very good.
Enjoyed the talk about maple rum.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Maven loves Beetlejuice and also says she's been following you since Townsend's.
That was a fun time.
Yeah, it was. Vinoge is trying to get in and out, having some technical issues. And then Flatwood Cellars Homebrewing specifically asked about any trusted sites to purchase wormwood.
Yeah, so let's see, for producers that are out there, I'm happy to help you guys with that. So the best quality stuff that you can get, and a lot of times, is unfortunately not within the United States of America. A lot of it is overseas, and you have to have a phytosanitary certificate to get it in. But Star West Botanicals and Mountain Rose are not bad at all. They have good high quality stuff. Just make sure you check both of them before you order, because they do flip flop back and forth on their prices quite a bit. But I've never gotten anything bad from either of those producers. When it comes to grand wormwood, depending on where you're located at, wormwood is pretty diverse. Grand wormwood is, and it grows a lot like a weed. I grow it in my backyard there in Pekin, Indiana, and it does great. And in fact, from a terroir perspective, it's much, much, much richer, much more bitter than the stuff that I get in from France. So there's a little distillery down in Louisiana, Alterier, I can't say it right, Alterier Bay, I think is what it is. And they grow their own wormwood and collapsible pots outside the distillery as well for their own absinthe production. So many of those botanicals you can grow yourself. So the wormwood you can grow green and yeast, but it's kind of like a touch me not. When it gets ripe, it'll pop if you try to touch the seed pods, and they end up everywhere. So it's kind of a pain. But basil, spinach, lemon balm, spearmint, peppermint, etc. Those are all things you can certainly grow yourself too.
Well, and in the documentary, if you watch that part, we live in LaGrange. There's a train outside here, so they're whistle. We did order some botanicals in, but a lot of those botanicals were things that were already growing in our garden here at home, Alan's garden, the Vinoge garden, the Locust Grove garden. So it was a lot of stuff we were already doing. Yeah, and Amy deserves the bulk of the credit for the garden. But yeah, and talking about grand wormwood, you gave us that grand wormwood plant.
Yes.
And we were sure we had killed it because we didn't get it in the ground. We had it in a flower pot in the sink in the laundry room, which freezes over the course of the winter. And it's like, crap, we screwed this up. And then when spring came, we took it out, put it in the ground. It flourished, and it was one of the few things that survived the deep Christmas freeze of 2022.
So
Yeah.
my current crop of chickens have dug 3 or 4 of my 3 to 5 year old wormwood plants out of the ground, and they've laid on the ground for 2 or 3 days, and I go dig a hole and throw them back in. They're fine. They're living through every bit of it. They don't care.
Just grow some wormwood.
We had one other person in the chat, actually. Are You My Mummy was saying the same thing. Grows wormwood in his backyard. Works great.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
I'm all for it. People should be growing a lot more medicinal plants. You never know when you're going to need them.
Yep.
Would also say that people should be buying stills and having those on hand, because you never know when you might need it.
Yep.
So
Say it's an apparatus not intended for alcohol production.
that's right. Essential oils.
Right.
It's for pretties.
Yeah.
It's for pretty stuff.
Yeah. Rustic.
That's right. It's a water fountain.
Anything else in there, sweetie?
Mostly just people being supportive and everything, and having nice things to say about the documentary.
Well, we really appreciate you guys. How many people got in here right now?
At the moment, 10. We've had a few people coming and going as we go. Oh, your mom just came in.
Oh,
Carrie
hey, Mom.
Fishing says, I have nothing intelligent to ask. Just a big fan.
Well, thank you so much. Mom lives in one of the nicest little towns in southeastern Ohio called Shadyside. It is a village, not a town. There's one lane in, one lane out, no traffic lights. Great place to be. I credit Mom with a lot of my, desire to explore history. She took me to my first antique shop. She showed me that old photos were, the greatest thing in the world, and we spent a lot of time going over those. And
That's awesome.
yeah, and here we are now.
And your mom says she loves you.
Oh, I love you too, Mom.
Like to meet your mom in person sometime. I ain't never met Mama Cushing. We're gonna have to, we're gonna have to make it happen.
We
sometime.
We will. So yeah, but thanks everybody for coming in, for hanging in with us, for all the support you give us, especially for watching, liking, subscribing, sharing, all that. It really does mean a lot. That helps to get our work in front of other people. Again, for those who've come in later, this was a 3-year labor of love. It started off at work. It turned out to be something that we wanted just because we wanted to do it. So yeah, it's been a nice victory lap so far. Absolutely. Pretty good stuff in it.
You know, it's funny. I hadn't been into the bottled and bond in a long time.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a molasses cookie.
It kind of is. Yeah.
Float this in front of the camera.
Yeah. So this is Alan's apple brandy. This did change my life and send it on the right course.
Still pretty happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
Can't complain.
And that's the other thing too. I know a lot of people did actually get to know us through Townsend's, but if you didn't, go to Townsend's channel and watch the video we did on apple brandy.
That day was a struggle.
It was cold.
I was sick.
That's right. You were sick.
Mm-hmm.
We had the fires going under the boiler and the still, and if you stepped away from them, you were freezing.
John asked a lot of questions, and I didn't want to talk no more. It was going south, but it was a good time, and video turned out great.
It did.
I still get weirdness out of that, like people that have known me that my whole life, and I don't realize how like into this I am, and I have my own channel, all that stuff. But occasionally I'll run into somebody like Walmart in Salem, right? And they're like, "Hey, we were watching the YouTubes the other day and saw you on Townsend's."
Yep, I've got that too.
Yep, you sure did.
Well, two things about that. First of all, the brandy turned out amazing. It was 120 proof spirit, give or take. And I did not expect the pop of fruit flavor we were going to get when it goes over your tongue.
It was a lot, and we had good apples too. Remember, we had Turley wine sap, or just wine saps. We didn't have Turleys, but the wine saps.
And that was from Evans Orchard in Georgetown, Kentucky. Is where we got that stuff. They hooked us up. And the other thing I've got to mention is I realized something about myself one time when we were working down at the distillery at Locust Grove. And when we did stuff down at Locust Grove, when we did the distillery demos down there, me and Alan were always the first there. We rolled in between 8 and 8:30. We got in, we started, we just got down to cleaning, getting everything ready. There's a whole process that goes into getting ready for a day of mashing in the distillery. And we were just working one morning. And Alan said, "You know what I like working? You know what I like about working with you early in the morning?" I was like, "What's that?" He's like, "You don't talk if there's nothing to say." I appreciate that about people too.
Can you take some pictures? Sorry. No, I can't. Not allowed.
Flatwoods Homebrewing wants to know how the harvesting yeast from apples went.
It went well. I unfortunately didn't keep up with it as well as I should have, but no, I got what I wanted. I had been challenged on the question that the cloudiness on the outside of apples was yeast. And so I was like, well, I'll show you. And so I didn't follow up at the end of the video because we didn't wind up using it in a batch of cider because just time didn't meet
right.
it. But no, yeah, we produced yeast. It smelled great. Yeah, I regret not having done the conclusion of that project.
Well, the important thing though is now you know how to capture yeast and propagate yeast.
And you helped me out halfway through that.
Yeah, which it's something that most people don't know how to do. And then, again, you should know how to do.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that we did that actually got me interested in doing one piece at a time was back during the pandemic. I actually did a couple live videos on propagating yeast because remember, nobody could get yeast. And they're all freaking out. I'm like, I think there's yeast everywhere. What is wrong with you people? It's everywhere.
Well, if Asha and Aiden are on, I know during the pandemic when the grocery stores were crazy, she was trying to make some bread, and so she skimmed some off the top of one of Aiden's cider batches.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
made some great bread out of it. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yep. I mean, Fleischmann's and Red Star both are the exact same species of yeast as what you make beer, wine, or brandy and whiskey out of. So they're a Cerevisiae yeast.
Literally, once you've done it, you realize the only difference between bread, beer, and whiskey is how you cook it. It's all the same thing.
Yes, except winemakers and brewers are way less talented than distillers.
Well, sure, yeah, that. But once you take that talent to another level,
right? Do you like that awkward silence I left in there for you?
I like that. How we doing out there, sweetie?
Well, we're over our hour. I tell you what, let's hand me a couple of those bottles we recommended. I'm going to hold them up closer to the camera. Okay. So for folks who want to get into absinthe, this is the Spirits of French Lick Le Bleu from Alan. And I think, Alan, you were saying maybe it's a good introductory, a little milder.
It is. That's a great introductory absinthe. Definitely an absinthe for Midwesterners.
Yeah.
And look on that for that maybe on sealbox.com.
Mm-hmm. And spiritsofFrenchlick.com. And then this was a limited edition, but we're getting ready to release some more of that here shortly, including another version that's actually got an Amburana oak finish to it. So nice. A little bit of that's kind of Ceylon cinnamon sort of characteristic to it. So again, spiritsofFrenchlick.com. And then when that comes out, Sealbox, oftentimes they'll maybe order a case or two if somebody wants something like that. So.
And don't forget our standby.
Probably available in most states without checking to see if that's true.
It's good stuff too.
St. George. Their gins are also really nice.
Yeah. All right. Very good.
And again, like we said, other than the Le Bleu, the Spirits of French Lick Le Bleu, don't look to spend less than $60 on a bottle of absinthe, but also don't look to drink it like you would anything else. It's going to last you for a while. So, if you got to save your pennies, save your pennies. We would keep absinthe in the house times when we were especially broke. We just made it a priority.
That's the real origin of absinthe. It was on the ark.
Yeah.
With Noah. It's the only thing that he wouldn't drink through that.
I believe it. Yeah. So there you go.
Right.
That and the 2 elephants that are about to be retired from the Louisville Zoo.
Amen.
Wrapping on up.
So thank you all so much again for coming along with us. We appreciate everything that you do. We appreciate you actually, looking at what we do and all that. And it's just what we do for fun. And so that anybody else cares is a great thing to us. And thanks to Alan for coming on with us, making the drive down from Pekin.
Well, thanks for letting me be a part of everything, man, and making an excellent film. And one thing I'll point out real quick before we go here. This is Brian's first film, and he did a damn good job with it.
Well, thank you.
He did a fine job with it. And it's a quality thing, and it restores some Hoosier history and includes Kentucky and Brian's career, my career, and Locust Grove, etc., and the whole thing. So it's a really, really cool project.
I really appreciate that. It was a labor of love, and it paid off. So thanks to everybody. We'll be seeing you soon. I'm not exactly sure what we'll be doing next, but we'll be doing something. We're always up to something. So
Stone Beer documentary.
That would be fantastic.
Yep. Maple syrup.
Yep. We do maple beer out of the maple syrup.
And then distill the beer.
Yeah. Yes. So there you go. Preview of the ideas that we might get done within the next 10 years. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Here's to you.
Awesome.
Yay.
I feel like that went well.
That went great.